Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today I have a review of the ECX 124 scale microcrawler. Now, for whatever reason, every time a microcrawler comes out, I always get kind of excited because I have a lot of good spots in and around the house for a microcrawler. They're kind of well suited with the size of the rocks, things like that. Not really well suited for a larger crawler, but something this size kind of fits just right. The reality is it's kind of hard to pull off a microcrawler that performs well. And I did have my hopes up for this one because, you know, the price is relatively high for what you get. And I was hoping it'd be a great crawler. Now what I'm going to do is just intersperse some video of this thing crawling as I talk about it. Overall, it does crawl, but it does have some shortcomings, which I think you guys should know about. And we'll go ahead and talk about that in a second. First, let's just look at what you get in the box. Of course, you have the crawler here, USB charger for your nickel metal hydride battery, and then we have this little 2.4 gigahertz radio. And let me just show you guys this radio real quick. It's kind of small, a little bit of a toy quality to it, but it does have all the features you want. Oh, and they also give you 4 AA batteries, which is nice. You have your servo reversing, you have throttle trim, steering trim, and then you also have your steering rate and throttle rate. And of course, you know, if you're just getting into RC cars and you get this out of the box and you're not familiar, I would just recommend turning your steering rate all the way to the max and turning the throttle rate all the way to the max. This is not a very fast crawler. In fact, you know, crawlers are slow in general. They're supposed to be torquey but slow. Even with this throttle rate at the highest level, it's still a pretty slow truck, and you want to have that at the high level to get out of tough spots. Same with the steering. There's no real use for having the low steering rates. You want to just put the steering rate at the maximum and drive it that way, and then adjust your steering trim, throttle trim as you need to. On-off switch right in here, and just close that up. So not a bad little radio for the truck. And here is the 124 scale temper. I'll just give you guys a quick look at it with the body on. You've got the body clips on the side, and let's go ahead and just take off these body clips and look at the chassis. Alright, so here is the crawler with the body removed. You have this aluminum vertical side plate, and then pretty much everything else on this thing is plastic. Plastic links, plastic suspension, plastic drive shafts, plastic everywhere here. And the suspension is kind of interesting because when you move it, you see it has a lot of lateral movement side to side, both in the front and the back. And then as far as articulation goes, you don't travel too far before this link up here jams up against the shock tower. So this link just hits the shock tower and then you're kind of stuck. That's it. Very, very limited movement there. You will get a little more movement if the truck kind of twists a little bit, and you can move it from the back and it'll kind of twist a little more, but pretty limited travel. And you also have, you know, this little brushed motor in there with the 4.8 volt nickel metal hydride. So not a real powerful setup. And given this limited travel and that kind of limited power, this is not a very torquey or fast truck at all. It will tend to bog down at times, especially if you're trying to run it over some kind of difficult rocks. So somewhat limited there. I think they could have designed it a little bit better, could have given it a better power system, and I think they could have done better with the suspension. Now the servo is pretty decent. I feel like the wheels could, you know, move even when they're getting stuck, and the travel is pretty good when you have the travel set to the maximum on the radio, as I mentioned. I ran the truck on the small rocks, on the wood chips, outside, on the edges, around the planter with the bigger rocks, and probably around the planter with the smooth river rocks was the most fun because that was kind of most suited for driving this thing. You know, it's kind of hard to find a good course for a microcrawler because it tends to be either too easy or it can be too difficult, and the truck will just either be flipping over all the time or getting stuck. So finding that course that is just right to make it challenging but doable is sometimes a little bit difficult. but you know, it will crawl around those river rocks, and that was definitely kind of fun. But you do have to realize that it does have some limitations. So you're not going to be crawling over huge obstacles, things like that. You know, if it gets too steep at an angle like this, it's going to flip back and flip over. It does have the high center of gravity, and it doesn't have tons of power in the wheels. So you kind of have to find the right area to drive it. The drive setup on this thing is worm gear drive front and back. So actually, because of that, it will actually hold pretty well on a vertical surface. The limitation, of course, is the high center of gravity, but the wheels will hold, and it could drive up and down the pretty steep railing fairly well. The runtime on the truck is about 13 minutes or so, and that's running the truck continuously with the throttle rate set at the highest level. And once you hit that 13-minute mark, the power does start to drop off. And once it does, the truck just doesn't have the power to get out of difficult situations. It really starts to bog down. So pretty much time to recharge it at that point. I did time the driving after 5 or 6 cycles of the battery, so the battery was well broken in to get that 13 minutes. After a full run, the motor and electronics were just barely warm, so nothing's really getting stressed. And it takes about 1 hour and 20 minutes to recharge it with the USB charger. So we had some fun taking turns driving the Temper and seeing if we could make it all the way around the planter. My 7-year-old daughter drove the truck for a while, and she said that it was definitely fun, but she prefers a quadcopter. So, you know, I can't really argue with that because quads are awesome. Well, for the price of this thing, I think that it comes up a little short in a few areas. You're spending a fair amount of money for this mini crawler. And, you know, I always have my hopes up really high for these things that are going to just be amazing and blow you out of the water. But, you know, it does okay. I think that for the money, you should get a better power system with this. I think a 2-cell LiPo, a bigger motor, more power to the wheels would be great. And of course, this suspension is just really kind of odd and doesn't really work that well. Jams up too much. I think that they could have done a better job with that. That's just design. The servo is okay. The steering rate is okay. Of course, it's got a relatively high center of gravity. You do spend a lot of time flipping this thing over, picking it up, trying it again, flipping it over, picking it up, trying it again. And then, you know, eventually it does something kind of cool, but you do spend a lot of time getting this thing unstuck. It gets high centered, things like that. But, you know, I think for the money, I'd expect a little bit more. Now, I do have the Hobby King 124 scale Basher on order. It's coming in. I think that'll be a good truck to compare to this because price-wise, about the same. The Basher is a little less expensive than this truck, but when you factor in shipping, it's actually about the same or even a little bit more. So I think maybe I'll do a head-to-head test of that, especially if you guys are interested. Other than that, here it is, the ECX 124 scale Temper. Thanks for watching, guys. Any questions or comments, please post below, and I'll see you next time.